I want to read to you Daniel chapter 3, which is the story of Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. The context of this is the children of Israel had disobeyed God, and as was prophesied, they were taken over and conquered, and they were deported out of their beloved promised land and sent into captivity into Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar. And so at this point, Israel are basically slaves to this king and to his pagan gods and the things he worshipped. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. I mean, this thing was huge. And he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he sent messages to the high officers, officials, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the provincial officials to come to the dedication of the statue he had set up. So all these officials came and stood before the statue King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald shouted out, "People of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and other musical instruments, bow to the ground to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, whatever their race or nation or language, bowed to the ground and worshipped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. But some of the astrologers went to the king and informed on the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "Long live the king. You issued a decree requiring all the people to bow down and worship the gold statue when they hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and other instruments. That decree also states that those who refuse to obey must be thrown into the blazing furnace. But there are some Jews, Shadrack, Meschack, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, your majesty. They refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the gold statue you have set up." These three Jews, Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego, were actually rulers, in charge. They were supervisors of Israel. They were so trustworthy and sharp, intelligent, good leaders that the king put them in charge of the children of Israel in Babylon. And of course, there's always somebody that wants to inform, right? Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage and ordered that Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego be brought before him. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or worship the gold statue I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I've made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And then what God will be able to rescue you from my power?" Can you imagine yourself in that situation? What would you have done? If you don't bow down before this gold idol that he set up, you're thrown into a blazing furnace, immediately killed, and he's given you one more chance. And you're standing there. What do? Well, here's what these guys did. Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve will save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up." There it is. That's what they said. You know, God will take care of us. But even if he doesn't, we will never worship your false gods or this idol. Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So they tied them up and threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because the king, in his anger, had demanded such a hot fire, get this, in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. So Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames, and, of course, to certain death. Or did they? But suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "We certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god." Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meschack, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. Then the high officers, officials, governors, and advisors crowded around them and saw that the fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their heads was singed, and their clothing was not scorched. They didn't even smell of smoke. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command, and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make this decree: if any people, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego, they will be torn limb from limb." Nice guy, huh? "Torn from limb, and their houses will be turned into heaps of rubble. There is no other God who can rescue like this." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego to even higher positions in the province of Babylon. Quite a record, huh? Wow. What a record. You know, I have no doubt this happened. I have no doubt that this literally did come to pass. And just think about that. These guys were willing to risk death rather than bow down and to worship any other God except the true God. Not only were they saved, but they were promoted. And it turned to be a glory to God, where even Nebuchadnezzar had to say, "There is no other God that can deliver like this God." So what does this mean to you? Are you going to get thrown in a burning fiery furnace today? No, not yet. We haven't been forced to bow down to any rulers yet. But what about other things that we might be tempted to worship instead of God? Like smoking, like drinking, eating. All things are good for us, but anything done in excess or done in the wrong way can damage us. And most importantly, anything that gets in the way of serving God, that becomes more important to us than God. You know, a candy bar can be an idol. If you like that candy bar more than you like God, a cell phone can have the Bible in it, or it can be a distraction from God, because the first thing in the morning, you don't get up to look at the Bible, you get up in the morning to look at your cell phone. So my challenge to you today in this is to think about Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego. They didn't bow. And they said, even if we burn, we're not going to bow. And whatever you're facing today, whatever temptation you are having in your life that wants you to bow down and serve instead of the true God, take a stand. Don't bow down. Don't bow down. Don't give in. Because there is no God that can deliver like the God of Shadrach, Meschack, and Abednego.